Imagine for a second the ultimate exchange program. And you know the drill. Usually you're picturing, what, a semester in Paris, maybe a few months in Tokyo?
Right, you learn a bit of the language, you eat some good food.
Exactly. You come back a little more cultured. But I want you to just completely shift gears. Imagine the destination wasn't another country. Imagine it was 39 light years away.
And the commitment wasn't a semester, it was a decade.
A decade. It just gives a whole new meaning to studying abroad, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. You're not just crossing an ocean, you are crossing a galactic void.
And that is the premise we are looking at today. We are digging into one of the most controversial, mind-bending, and honestly cinematic deep holes in ufology history. We are talking about Project SERPO.
This is a huge topic. We're looking at a collection of leaked documents, alleged whistleblower accounts, and mission transcripts that describe a top-secret mission from the mid-1960s.
And the core claim is just staggering.
Oh, it's staggering. A team of 12 humans leaving Earth to live on an alien planet for 13 years.
So just to set the ground rules for this deep dive, we aren't here today to debate, are aliens real, or is this a hoax?
No.
We are going to treat this source material almost like a historical record for the next 20 minutes. We want to unpack the incredibly specific details in these accounts. Because whether you think it's fact or fiction, the story they tell about these 12 astronauts, and specifically how they had to learn to communicate, is absolutely wild.
That's really the core of it for me. It's not just about, the spaceship. It's about the profound implications of what happens next. If you put humans and aliens in a room, how do they actually talk? What happens when language just completely fails? And the SERPO documents, they offer a very specific, almost technical answer to that.
So let's rewind. Set the scene for us. Where does this whole story begin? Because 1965 feels like a very specific time to launch a starship. I mean, we were barely figuring out how to get to the moon.
Well, according to the sources, the roots of Project SERPO go all the way back to the Roswell incident in 1947.
Of course.
The documents allege that after that crash, the U.S. government didn't just recover some debris, they eventually established contact. And over almost 2 decades, this evolved into a clandestine agreement with an extraterrestrial civilization they called the EBENs.
The EBENs, okay. Sure. And this agreement, it wasn't just a handshake or a trade deal for some tech.
No, it was a personnel exchange. The mission profile was set for 1965. The goal was to send a team of 12 military personnel to the EBEN homeworld, a planet called SERPO in the Zeta Reticuli star system.
12 people. Now, looking at the sources, they're pretty specific about who these people were. It wasn't just, grab 12 guys from the Air Force.
Far from it. The selection process is described as incredibly rigorous. Months of psychological and physical screening. But there's one detail in the roster that I think often gets overlooked.
What's that?
The crew wasn't entirely male. The accounts specifically mentioned that one of the 12 astronauts was a woman.
Which is a fascinating detail for 1965. I mean, NASA didn't put a woman in space until Sally Ride in the 80s. The military was completely male-dominated.
Exactly. If you were just making up a sci-fi story in the 60s, you'd probably make them all men with buzz cuts.
Right.
It suggests the criteria for this mission were just fundamentally different. They weren't just looking for pilots. They were looking for psychological resilience. Group dynamics become more important than rank if you're gone for a decade.
So they needed a balanced team, a microcosm of humanity, or as close as they could get.
That seems to be the idea.
Okay, so they select the 12, they train for months, and then it's go time. This is the part that trips me up, the logistics. How do you get to Zeta Reticuli in 1965? We're using slide rules.
This is where the accounts veer sharply into hard sci-fi. The sources describe a gateway, or a Stargate, that was actually constructed in the Nevada desert.
A Stargate in Nevada. It really sounds like a movie plot.
It does, but the documents treat it as an engineering reality. Allegedly, it was built with EBEN assistance to facilitate the journey. The physics aren't explained, but the effect is clear. It bridged the gap.
And the mission was for 13 years. They were signing away more than a decade of their lives.
Can you even imagine that departure? Standing in the desert, looking at this alien device, knowing you're not coming back for 13 years, no letters home, no phone calls.
It's terrifying.
Yeah.
It requires a level of detachment I can't comprehend.
And according to the reports, the The initial arrival on SERPO was actually deceptively smooth. The first few months were just observations, setting up a base, setting the biology, scientific gold mine.
But the honeymoon phase didn't last. Because like you said, the biggest hurdle wasn't the atmosphere, it was talking to the locals.
Right. And this brings us to what I think is the most intellectually stimulating part of these documents, the Great Barrier.
The take me to your leader problem.
Exactly. How do you do that when you physically cannot speak the language? And I don't just mean you don't know the vocabulary. The sources explain that the EBEN physiology was fundamentally different.
Their vocal cords, you mean?
Their entire vocal structure, it was highly different. The reports describe their language as a tonal and frequency-based system. It didn't map onto any Earth language at all.
So you can't just point at a rock and say rock and have them repeat it.
It just wouldn't work. Their throats couldn't make our sounds, and ours couldn't make theirs. And even beyond that, the linguistic structure itself was truly alien. It lacked elements we consider essential, like tenses.
Wait, hold on. No tenses. How do you explain history? How do you plan for tomorrow if you don't have a future tense? That breaks my brain a little bit.
It's a massive cognitive challenge. The traditional tools, visual symbols, math, pre-taught vocab, they all failed or were just incredibly inefficient.
It's like trying to run Windows software on a biological tree. The operating systems just don't talk to each other.
That's a great analogy. So they had to pivot. The humans had to change how they communicated. The reports describe a shift to something called empathetic resonance.
Empathetic resonance. That sounds less like linguistics and more like, I don't know, therapy, magic.
In a way, it was a cognitive shift. It wasn't about learning words, it was about syncing minds. Which leads us to the primary method of EBEN communication, high-order telepathy.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because when I hear telepathy, I think of a comic book character hearing voices in their head. The sources describe something much more specific, right?
Much more technical. This wasn't vague mind reading, it was structured. The sources describe the messages as coming in bundles.
Bundles, like data packets.
Yes, exactly. Think about how we speak. It's linear. The dog ran. The EBEN communication was nonlinear. Information arrived as a complete data packet that contained emotion, intent, and conceptual images all at once.
So it's like getting a zip file downloaded into your brain instantly, rather than reading a text message letter by letter.
That's a perfect analogy. You receive the whole file, and then your brain has to unzip it. And it required a mutual state. Both parties had to be receptive, almost meditative. You couldn't just shout telepathically.
The sources talk about thought forms as the actual language. Could you give us an example of how that works?
This is where it gets really interesting. The text gives a specific example. Let's say an EBEN wants to tell you, I am hungry. They wouldn't send those words.
Okay.
Instead, they would project an internal visual, a thought form of an empty stomach. But attached to that visual is the specific emotional sensation of discomfort and maybe a memory flash of a specific food.
Wow. So you don't just know they're hungry, you kind of feel their hunger.
You understand the concept holistically, the biological need, the emotional state, the object of desire all at once. No grammar, no syntax, just pure meaning.
That sounds incredibly efficient, but also exhausting. Imagine walking through a crowded room and feeling everyone's bundles.
It required immense training. The humans had to undergo biofeedback and meditation training just to do this without getting overwhelmed. They had to build mental libraries to link human concept to these EBEN thought forms. They were essentially rewiring their brains.
Did they have any tech to help? Like a universal translator?
There is mention of assistive devices, headsets, or crystals to amplify frequencies. But here's the kicker. The EBENs actually discouraged the humans from relying on them.
Really? Why?
They viewed consciousness as a trainable skill. They wanted the humans to expand their natural capacity, not rely on a crutch. It suggests they saw telepathy as a discipline, a muscle you could build.
That is wild. It's like they were saying, put down the calculator, do the math in your head, it's good for you.
Precisely. But as fascinating as this was, we have to pivot back to the reality of the mission, because it wasn't just sitting around meditating and swapping thought forms.
No. This is where the story takes a darker, grittier turn. The sources are pretty grim about the toll this took. This was not a vacation.
It was physically and psychologically devastating. The planet SERPO had a harsh, unpredictable climate, different radiation levels, a different day-night cycle.
And not everyone made it. The numbers are rough. The sources explicitly state that several astronauts died on the planet.
Yes. Accidents, natural causes. Others experienced severe health problems. It was a frontier, and the environment itself was trying to kill them.
But then there's the mystery that really stuck with me. The deaths I can understand. But then there were the stayers.
Ah, yes, the astronauts who never came back.
So the mission ends, it's time to go home, the bus is leaving, and some of them aren't on it.
It's one of the most provocative parts of the documents. The theories vary. Did they choose to stay? Did they decide life on SERPO, despite the hardships, was better than returning?
Or were they abandoned?
That's the darker theory. Or another possibility is that they simply integrated. Imagine living in a telepathic society for a decade. You spend 10 years communicating with pure emotion and truth, returning to a world of spoken words, of lies, of isolation. It might feel like going back to the Stone Age.
That's a heavy thought.
Yeah.
You change so much you can't go home. You become more EBEN than human.
It's ambiguous, and for the ones who did return, the returnees, it wasn't a parade and a medal ceremony.
No, the sources say they came back in poor health, totally disoriented.
Disconnected. The claims suggest they were placed under immediate government control, quarantine. There's a suggestion that exposure to the SERPO environment caused irreversible biological effects. They were strangers on their own planet.
It really highlights the human cost. We always think about the technology, the warp drives. We rarely talk about whether the human mind can survive the experience of simply being there.
And that brings us back to the limits of that telepathic connection, because even though they achieved it, it wasn't perfect.
Right. Things still got laws in translation, which makes sense.
Exactly. The sources note the difficulty in conveying sarcasm, humor, or cultural references.
I can imagine. Trying to telepathically explain a joke. You just get a blank thought form back, like trying to explain a political meme to an alien. Good luck.
It falls flat. But more importantly, it went both ways. Human trauma, subconscious thoughts, they would cloud the reception. If an astronaut was afraid, that fear would bleed into the message.
It's like trying to talk on a phone line full of static, but the static is your own anxiety.
That's a great way to put it. You can't hide your feelings. If you're resentful, the EBEN feels your resentment. It forces a level of honesty that we aren't really built for.
We rely on little white lies to get through the day. Stripping that away must have been exhausting.
It really challenges the boundaries of cognition. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the sources raise a massive question. Is language a living system that evolves with consciousness?
What do you mean by that?
Well, look at how we communicate now. We are increasingly moving toward compressed communication, emojis, GIFs, memes. We're trying to convey bundles of emotion and context very quickly.
That is true. If I send you a specific meme, I'm conveying a joke, an attitude, and a cultural reference all in one image. In a weird way, we are creating to mimic that data packet style.
And there are parallels to AI as well. AI compresses vast contexts into fractions of a second. The EBEN method might be a biological version of that efficiency.
That's a spooky thought. They were building computers to think like them.
Or that our computers are pushing us to think in a more advanced way. The sources suggest this type of nonverbal, empathetic communication might be the only viable option for interstellar diplomacy. Spoken language will be useless,
You need to connect mind to mind.
which requires a level of openness that humans aren't exactly famous for. Project SERPO suggests space travel isn't just an engineering problem, it's a consciousness problem.
So let's wrap this up. A secret launch in '65. A dozen people traveled to Zeta Reticuli. They struggle to learn a language with no words, only pictures and feelings. Many die. Some stay behind. And the ones who come back are forever changed.
It's a tragedy, an adventure, and a warning, all rolled into one. The sources present a story where the biggest gap between species wasn't the 39 light years of space.
It was the structure of thought itself.
It really suggests that true understanding requires a shared state of being, not just a shared dictionary.
I want to leave you with a final thought, something straight from the implications of these documents. If these accounts are true, even partially, are they just reports from the past? Or are they a glimpse into the future of human evolution?
That is the question. Perhaps the next great leap in our communication isn't better smartphones. Perhaps it's a fundamental change in how we use our minds. Maybe one day we won't need to say, "I'm hungry" or "I love you." We'll just know.
A world without misunderstandings. Sounds nice, but also terrifying. Thanks for diving deep with us today.
Always a pleasure.